I call this meeting of the Hurst-Euless-Bedford Independent School District to order. Let the record show that a quorum of board members is present, that this meeting has been duly called, and that notice of this meeting has been posted in accordance with Texas Open Meeting Act, Texas Government Code, Chapter 551. Good evening to everybody. We know it's only 4 days till spring break, but we still got 4 days, so you got to stick with it for 4 more days. All right, and happy birthday to our own secretary, Miss Julie Cole. So happy birthday.
Thank you.
All right.
I expect a song. No.
Yeah.
We got some singers in the back.
Tonight, the Board of Trustees, I didn't get a Facebook post. Tonight, the Board of Trustees is meeting in a called works session board meeting. The board welcomes and appreciates comments and input from the community. Open forum is provided at each meeting to allow the public to address the board. There will be 2 open forums tonight. Open forum number 1 is to hear requests regarding agenda items only. Open forum number 2 is to hear requests or make comments regarding non-agenda items and will be heard at the end of the meeting. Those addressing the board are asked to limit their comments to 3 minutes per meeting. The speaker should identify his or her name, group affiliation, if any, and make a brief presentation with an identified solution if one is sought. Remarks should be addressed to the board as a whole. Oral presentations may not include charges against any employee or board member by name. It is my responsibility to determine if the person addressing the board has attempted to resolve a concern informally or through the district's complaint policies. If not, the speaker will be directed to follow the appropriate policy. The board requests that all presentations be made in a courteous, respectful, and professional manner and asks that speakers monitor their own behavior. If you wish to speak during one of the open forums, please fill out a card located on the table in the entry hall. Dr. Harrington, any comments?
I'll just share I got to read "The Pigeon Will Ride the Roller Coaster" at Meadow Creek today. So an exciting day with some kindergartners, so we had fun. And I don't have any clarification at this time.
Okay. Any cards for open forum number 1? Ms. Hollander? Nope. All right, we do not need a closed session, so any questions on disbursements for the month of February 2023? All right, 6.02, Transportation Report. Mr. Williams?
You can pull that up. Okay, a few month ago, maybe, I don't remember how long ago, we had some requests about some information on some bus breakdowns and different things, so I've put together this report for you. First page is just kind of just a general, to give you a general idea of what our transportation department looks like. We have 93 FTEs in that department. We currently have 70 bus drivers. For bus drivers, we have 93 with currently 70. That number is a little bit misleading because we don't ever have 93 bus drivers hired, but we've always got a bunch in the pipeline working, trying to get those hired. But still, at 70, we are pretty tight. We do have 30 monitors, and we are fully staffed there. We have 7 office staff and 7 shop staff positions, and the only place we're short in the shop is we are trying to hire 1 mechanic. I don't know if they got him hired yet or not, but and we currently have an interim director and an interim operations manager. So I asked Mr. Slimmons, Mr. Terry Slimmons back there in the back, he is our interim transportation director. I said, I'm gonna make you come to at least 1 board meeting. And then that way, if there's some questions you have that maybe I can't answer, he's been there 30 days, a little over 30 days. He might have a better idea than I do. But anyway, vehicles, of course, you can see we have 112 yellow buses, 4 wide activity buses, 3 Suburbans, and 3 shop trucks. And then we have 133 white fleet, which is your maintenance vehicles, vans, all those type of things. This is the meat of the report right here. What I did was break it down into our route buses and our coach buses. The coach buses are the buses the coaches take when they request a bus to go wherever they need to go. And I just broke it down by school year so you could compare. For the current year, so far on route buses, we've had 32 breakdowns or repairs compared to 37 last year. The 2 years prior to that, 2020, 2021, There, of course, we didn't run all of the year nor the other year, so that data is really pretty skewed. There might have been a little data there to compare, but it didn't do any good for comparison purposes, so I left it out. 18-19 year, we had 41, so that runs fairly consistent year in, year out with our repairs. Coach buses, you can see the same thing. Current year, we've had 9 breakdowns compared to 16 last year, compared to 11 back in pre-COVID, 18-19 pre-COVID. The next several slides, I'm not going to go into over, but it was there for just detail. This is your coach buses. This was the repairs for this year, what those were. Just various typical type things we run into all the time with different buses. And I knew the bus year would be important to you, so I included that in there. There's the year prior to that. What I might point out on this one is you'll see several times there's dead battery. That usually happens when somebody left the lights on and we had to go jump them off or take them another bus or do something like that. And then you can see, of course, the COVID years and then back at 18-19. But it's this similar type things. They're just normal, everyday wear and tear type things. And then the last thing, it's actually 2 pages because there's so many I had to put them on 2 pages. This is the route bus breakdowns. And, of course, a lot more of those, so we're going to have a lot more things that we're going to have to repair. And if you've got any questions or would like more to see something else or ask Mr. Slimmons a question.
Yeah, the only thing I think about is, seems like when they go to Chisholm Trail or Crowley or North Crowley, I think one broke down at North Crowley this year in soccer, and it's 10 at night in a parking lot, girls' team, and they got to go all the way to North Crowley or Crowley. It's a long way. It seems like now if they're at Haltom or Richland or here close at Colleyville, I can understand, but if that same bus was on a bus route to Wilshire Elementary, you can be there in 10 minutes. So it seems like, at least for the distance, you know, one year we went to Abilene, you know, a little bit of thing there, but on the longer distance, it seemed like you'd really want the best bus and not any bus.
Right, and I
Haltom,
believe that's
Richland,
what they try to do.
South Lake Carroll, no big deal, because you can get there in pretty quick.
Right.
But it takes a while to get to Chisholm Trail, Crowley, North Crowley, and on Friday and Saturday night, you know, I don't want those kids in a dark parking lot with the buildings closed, with no restrooms, and it takes an hour and a half to get there.
If the trip is further away, they do try to send the best buses we have.
Well, one got stuck in Dallas here, I think earlier this year.
I think one Rockwall maybe or somewhere.
Yeah, so.
But Joseph and I and Mr. Slimmons and I, we discussed that, and I don't think we've had any that took us over an hour to get to them. Most of them are 30 minutes, give or take. We've got people on standby. Josh even has a couple of his maintenance drivers with CDLs that if we can't get a bus driver, we can get one of them because they can drive the bus there.
Josh, you have your
pick up the
CDL?
bus.
Do you have your CDL? Okay, I'm just
But
checking.
anyway, it's just extra
Wanna know who to
personnel.
call.
We typically try to send a mechanic, but we've got to get them there, get the bus, and then get on the road and go. So it does take a little bit of
I
time.
think one bus trip, a mechanic went on the trip with him.
That may be possible. I don't
So
know about that
that's kind of scary for me going to Dallas and playing in Dallas when you have a mechanic on the bus knowing that something may happen.
one. I'd have to check into that.
I
don't know
understand,
about that one.
but, you know, on some of these trips and where they go, it kind of worries me with those teenagers at 10 o'clock at night or at 9 at night in the
Oh,
dark,
Absolutely.
waiting on a bus.
But, Brendan, there's always somebody on the bus with the students, right? There's a coach or,
Yes,
yeah,
always.
yeah, okay. It just brought to mind that, you know, in 2009, after we won the state championship game in San Antonio, one of the rented Greyhound buses broke down on the highway on the way back, and we had to double up those buses. So I kind of feel like it can happen, you know, if it happens to them, it certainly can happen to
Yeah,
us.
I mean, there's almost never been a band trip where one of the buses didn't break down, and those are usually, you know, going to Indianapolis or something like that, and you have to sit and wait and
Well, I'll tell a story again about going to TMEA, and I think we had Roadrunner, and they sublet it to another bus company. And they went through Dallas to go to San Antonio, and up where the air conditioner was holes, and you could see the top of the ceiling of the bus. Coming back, both buses ran out of gas in Alvarado. And it was 2 o'clock in the morning till they could get, it takes a while to start the diesel. And so when I got on the board, I wanted to make sure when we get a bus company, that we don't let them sublet them to a lesser company, because then they can make more money going somewhere else. And I ended up taking kids home at 3 in the morning on that trip. Both of them ran out of gas at the same place. And I was at school the next morning, but you don't want to put those kids in that situation. And that's why I said earlier this year, please, when we get a contract to send kids to Indianapolis or to San Antonio for a Bands of America contest, that we don't sublet in the contract to another company, that's because Roadrunner can make more money by giving it to someone else when they can go farther on this trip. So there's some things about all the trips that worry me, especially about safety. And you know, in Dallas, I'm not sure a coach is a lot of help sometimes in Dallas.
Yeah.
Having worked there 7 years, I understand.
So Debbie, we're short, or you, I don't want to interrupt you, go ahead.
No. I was just gonna tell a quick story, which y'all probably don't even wanna hear.
Go ahead.
About a trip in a prior district where we had one of the motor coach buses chartered, breakdown in Allen, you know how far away that is, and it wasn't Granbury. And another thing school districts do is they all have everybody's phone number, and you can pick up the phone and call another school district transportation director and say, hey, we're stranded here, we need help. Yeah. They will send their buses out, and they will get your kids home, and that's what they did for that district. They drove our kids from McAllister all the way to Clyde, Texas, on 2 of their yellow dogs with their drivers. Of course, they sent us a bill for it, and we gladly paid it, but they got our kids home.
Well, we played a football game at the Cotton Bowl, leaving it, bricks were thrown at our bus, about 40 bricks were thrown at our bus. So I understand the situation at certain places.
It does happen, unfortunately. Okay, Chris, go ahead. What?
So Debbie, we've got 23, we're short 23 FTE drivers.
Right.
And 5 open routes. How many FTEs do we need to hire to be fully covered on all of our routes?
We really need to hire about, 10 to something like that. That way we've got all our routes covered, plus we've got drivers there on standby, because, I mean, you know, we get there in the morning at 5:30 a.m. or whatever time they get there, and somebody's called in sick, and all of a sudden we don't have a driver for that route. So, and that's where we're scrambling right now, is we've got mechanics driving, we've got office staff driving, we've got everybody that has a CDL driving buses just to get our routes covered every day. Now, Mr. Slimmons and Mr. Morgan, who I didn't ask him to come because y'all know him, they're doing a great job. They've interviewed 18 drivers. Now, not all of them are qualified, but the problem you have with drivers is it's a very slow process, because if they've got their CDL and their P endorsement, S endorsement, and they are already working in another school, well, that's great, man. They can just jump right in and start driving. But if they don't, wherever they're at in that process, or starting from the very beginning, it's a process. It takes a good while to get a driver licensed and trained and get them where they can actually drive a bus.
And what has been the biggest impediment to keeping us from being fully staffed? Is it the recruitment, but also the retention piece?
Yes, we were losing quite a few. Now, we haven't been losing too many here lately. I asked Mr. Slimmons that today. We haven't really lost too many here in recent weeks. But during the COVID time and all that, we lost a lot of drivers. And what we're in the process right now of trying to reconstruct our pay system, because our pay system is, what's the best way to just convoluted. It's very complicated, and it's not that we don't pay our drivers well, but the way we pay the drivers, it's very hard for them to understand how much they make and how do they compare that to what they can go to Birdville to make. Because I know we've had some drivers have left to go, have gone somewhere, and they find out when they get there, they're really not making any more money than they were making here. They just thought they were going to. And then some of them have actually locked themselves into 2-year contract because they took a sign-on bonus and they have to stay there and they can't. But we've actually had some drivers come back.
Yeah.
So it's coming around, but we're gonna get, Joe and I have made a commitment to get the convoluted pay issue straightened out to basically to where we pay our drivers an amount by the hour to where they can, and that's the way every district does it now. They used to, pay people by the route, by this. It just makes it really, really complicated, so.
Is our inability to have a fully staffed bus driving unit leading to overtime for our current
Yes,
bus drivers?
It is, yes.
That will lead to another issue with, once we start looking at salary increases
Yes.
and we have more people on board, we may not be raising all ships, because if they're losing out on overtime,
Right.
because we're more fully staffed.
And that's an issue we've got to look at and talk about. And, and even under our new structure, it's probably going to help most of them. It may hurt a few of them, just the way it all pans out. So we've got to make some decisions on how we're going to deal with that, how we're going to handle it.
Is that something we're going to be talking about in the upcoming budget?
Yes, I mean,
Okay.
that can be a topic. We're going to get that all straightened out, and I believe right now the plan is when we bring the salary schedules forward for y'all to approve, we probably won't have all this worked out just yet. So we probably won't include transportation. It'll maybe just say work in progress. or
That
something
may
to
be a
effect. So we may have
separate
to bring it
report.
back
We will
as a
bring it to you,
supplement.
but that's when we're working on, we've got to make sure that it's right. And so we're
Yes.
working through to clarify, and Cicely and her team have been looking at it and trying to hone this down to where we can make it a much simpler, and so they can all understand exactly what they're getting paid.
We've also been working with TASB. They've been giving us some help with that too, because that's part of what they do. So we don't want to create something that makes another issue or creates some other issue that we want to, as Joe said, we want to get it right.
Great. Of these 112 yellow buses, how many are in service?
Or working. How many are in service? How many we have not working? I don't know the answer to that.
Come on up.
Come on, yeah, come up. That way it's recorded on the.
Kind of afraid that I was retired, remember?
Welcome back.
No. I gotta tell you, that first morning, that alarm went off at 3:30 after being retired for about 3 years. I could have jumped out of the bed, so, but. With your, basically what you wanna do is you've got 30 regular 36 regular, 30 sped, so 66. Basically, what you're looking at, the coach buses, and I'm trying to get all this down, so don't quote me exactly, but out of that, usually you try to keep 20+%, because what'll happen, somebody drives up and they see all those buses, and only maybe 2/3 of them are gone, but then football season comes,
They're all gone.
and they're on field trip, and they're all gone. So it's a hard number to say. As far as route buses, you would want to keep at least 15% too for breakdowns. You just keep that, and then the coach buses on top of that. Does that answer?
How many do we currently have not working? Is that
Not working?
that are?
Just looking at the work orders, bless their hearts, Joseph and them have been driving a bus every day. So it's been, I'm gonna say some of the older buses we kind of put on the back row till later that are not getting used much. There's probably 8 or 10 that they're probably, it may be minor stuff that they need repairs on. Is that what you're asking right now? Yes, sir.
So we've kind of categorized these buses as either route buses or coach buses. Is that how each bus is categorized, or is that a simplification for tonight's presentation?
Well,
Or-
in this
or is
district,
a bus a route bus?
Yes, sir.
Or is a bus a coach bus, and is there any overlap?
That's a great question, but where I came from, just for example, we pulled our route buses to go on field trips. Sometimes that's frustrating to a driver, I will say, because it doesn't come back the way you, but to answer your question a while ago, the distance thing, I've already told them if it goes over certain miles, I'm gonna pull a route bus and send it. But yes, to answer your question, you have route buses, sped and regular, and then behind that is the coach buses on the back of the lot.
Okay. If there's a bus for a field trip or fine arts, is that a route bus or a coach bus?
That's a coach. Again,
Anything other than a route bus, a coach bus?
that's correct, yes, sir. Now, again, that change that we just put in effect since I've been there is to say if it's over a certain amount, we're taking a route bus, which is our newer buses, yes, sir.
Okay. It did strike me that some of these bus year models predated me being a kindergartner in this district.
I'm gonna agree with you 100%. When I went in there, I thought, wow.
What is an expected life, or the life expectancy
Okay.
of a school bus?
Yes. To answer your question, what we had where I came from Granbury, it's usually like you do a water fountain, like you do an AC, you do a replacement schedule. It works the very best. So there we averaged about 20,000 miles a year per bus. Here, Joseph said it's the last mile I looked 12, 13,000. So we did a 10-year 200 miles. At 200,000 miles, they say, well, it might go further. Yeah, but the windows may be falling out and the transmit, you know what I mean? The diesel engine might last longer, but that's what you run into. It's like anything else. It's going to cost you more to keep it running. So I would say here, you know, if you keep that 200,000 mile, you know, take that 12 and get it 200, however many years that is, would be a good number. 200,000 is a pretty solid number across the state.
And that's, when I talked to Joseph this afternoon, what he told me is that because we're such a small area district, we don't put that many miles on buses. We don't put that many miles on buses like you would out in a Granbury. And the miles we do put on them are not as hard as miles out in a rural district because you're not running up and down Caliche roads with potholes in them and everything else. So Joseph even said, you know, like your oil change on a bus is like 15,000 miles. He said we change them every 6 months because we don't hit that mark to change the oil. So we just do it every 6 months. So we're changing the oil more than the recommended schedule to change the oil in them, just because we don't. It's more time. It gets old rather than gets a lot of miles on it. So,
Of our 112 buses, do we know how many are over the 200,000 mile threshold?
Not
I don't think we have
Not
any.
very many. I don't think any.
Yeah, Joseph told me today we didn't have any over that amount.
None.
No. So that's what I say. That shows you how many miles we don't put on buses.
Yeah.
Do we have a replacement plan or a replacement schedule?
We don't have a formal plan. That was another thing I asked Joseph today, because of we put so few miles on them. Here you can literally get, like Terry said, the diesel engines and those things, the mechanical components will go forever. I mean, they'll go a long time. But what starts happening is the rest of the bus starts falling apart. You know, the chassis, the windows, as he mentioned, stuff like that. And then if you're running them on bumpy roads, it's even worse. So what they
Well,
do here,
should
they
we have a plan like that in place?
We could, but it would, you know, you wouldn't want to do like 10-year, 200,000 miles like Granbury. You'd want to do more like maybe when they hit 15 years old or maybe longer. Because, I mean, a bus here, you bought it new, and you're only putting 8,000, 10,000 miles a year on it. And, you know, in 15 years, it doesn't have that many miles on it. But, the body, the chassis, stuff like that's getting old.
We were talking about this today, though, is, we have replacement cycles for uniforms. We have some replacement cycles for instruments. We need to take a look, and it's not going to be similar to probably what they did in Granbury, but it still needs to be what works for us. So it lets us plan on when we need buses and how many to expect, instead of it being an unexpected purchase. So we know, hey, in 2028, we're anticipate buying 10 buses because that's a schedule. When we review the schedule, if we find something is off, maybe it allows us to convert more buses to activity buses, et cetera, but at least we've budgeted for that if we have that schedule. That's been the beauty of having the uniform replacement cycle and other cycles we can budget those.
And as a personal vehicle, 200,000 miles seems like a lot, but these are commercial vehicles that are built to go and go and go and go.
They're
So
built
if they're
for a
maintained properly and run properly, then they should last a long time.
It can go forever. But, even when they just get old, some of that electrical stuff and that kind of things, those things just start breaking just because of their age. The plastics in them start drying out and break-in and just different stuff like that.
We just bought 5 new buses recently. Are there safety features that are on those buses that are not on these buses from the 90s?
Oh, yes, seatbelts for one.
What else?
The high back seats,
High back seats, the
fire retardant material on the seats.
mechanism where the driver now has to walk to the back of the bus and punch a button. It's like to make the driver go to the back of the bus and check to make there's kids that are on there or not. There's a lot of different things on the newer buses that are not on those old buses.
Yeah, I tell you honestly, I hadn't seen one in years. We still got some hand operated door. So they're all, the newer ones are air door also.
Well, I think that this is really good information, and I know that we cannot prevent a bus breaking down with students on it, okay? But I think that a vehicle replacement plan, so we can start cycling out old buses and have a plan so the board knows what to expect in coming budget years, would be something that I'd at least like to see.
Yeah, and it's just a budgeting issue. I mean, it's just something that we just need to agree on what we're gonna do and how much we wanna spend and how often we wanna do that.
Yeah, I think it makes sense to have a regular plan. I will say that in the time that we've been on the board, we've seen on a regular sort of cadence, bus replacement, but I don't know that it's been a plan.
Right, it's typically, looking back, it's like 2 to 5 maybe a year. Some years, like this current year, I think we did 2 buses and then did what's called a repower, where they took it's a good bus chassis body and all that's good, but they something happened to the engine. There's a bunch of buses, and Terry could tell you more about it, but certain year models with certain types of engines in them, they weren't good when they were brand new. And some of those, I don't know what those are called, but Max 4 engines, that's it. I knew they had a name, but, so some of those everything's good, but that engine bad, so, we just replace the engine. But you gotta understand, to replace an engine in a bus and do all that, you're talking, what is that, 50, 60 grand? It's not cheap. So then you start weighing it against, well, how much does a new bus cost?
$98,000.
No. It's higher than that.
Higher now. Last time we bought them, they were $98,000.
What are they now? Probably you may not even know. You've been out so long. It's probably, I'm gonna say 120 or so. Of course, it all depends on what you get on them. Air conditioning, of course, you gotta get that. Pretty much that's a given nowadays. I remember the days when you used to buy buses without air conditioners, but you probably get lynched now.
Yeah. Do I remember that we had a grant that bought us some buses? How
Not
often
since I've
does
been
that
here, but
come
I think-
around?
I think that those are available from time to time.
Did
Yeah.
we-
think
That was-
we got a few
That
buses
was,
on a
that was a
grant.
settlement and a lawsuit,
It was a Volkswagen brand thing.
so.
So
that was
that
a
doesn't
one-time
come around
deal.
all the time.
Yeah.
That's one way. You can also, that can be part of your bond when you go out for bond, and you can buy, because buses are such a long-term thing. Some schools will finance those in a bond, but what they'll typically do on those is they'll do those on like a 3 to 5 year bond time, so that they're paid out much earlier than like a facility would be paid out over 25 or 30 years.
The same kind of schedule as the electronics.
Right. Yeah, very similar to technology stuff.
All right, any more questions? All right, financial statements.
All right.
Thank you. Good to meet
Terry.
you. He says I can retire whenever I want.
Okay, let's take a quick look at the financial statements ending January 31st, 2023. General fund, we had a fund balance of $227,205,918. This represents revenues over expenditures in the amount of $65,578,553. Interest income continues to perform very well. As of end of January, we're at $1.581 million as compared to $65,000 last year. So we're just at the end of January. We've still got several months to go. So that's gonna help us in a lot of areas. Total. There you go. But we're thinking it's gonna help us in the shortfall of ADA and enrollment. But if there's some left over, we definitely will look at buses. Or if the board chooses, we'll look at buses first. Total expenditures as of January 31st are at 40.07. That's below our 5 out of 12-month threshold of 42%. The Wrestler report, payroll is running, it was 69,111,013 for the period, which is 85%. And as I say every month, that number will creep up until it gets up to our 87, 88% that we typically run in a year's time of payroll. Utilities, second highest expense at 1,537,780. That's 2%, currently at 2% of our budget. Instructional supplies, the third highest expense, is 1,204,069. Food service fund, they continue to perform very well. Fund balance 9,728,325. That represents revenues over expenditures of 1,321,347. Keep doing great. Mary Ellen and her crew are doing great, even though they're continuing to be short-staffed. And that's running pretty consistent with what they have. They lose a few, they able to hire a few, lose a few, hire a few. Don't know what the answer to that is. It's just I think it's just the market we're in right now. But the fund is performing as expected. Debt service fund, fund balance 49,823,448. That represents revenues over expenditures of 33,558,581. Same in this fund, the investment interest, 313,886 as compared to 5,380 last year. So, and what I didn't say about the general fund, backing up a second, what we budgeted for revenue is 300,000 for the year. So we're well in excess of what we budgeted for revenue. Same thing with this fund. I don't know exact number in this fund we budget, but it's not that much, maybe 10, 20,000. Of course, we just made our first debt service payment, and our second will be due in August to make our total payments of $36,781,627. And we will start looking into the defeasance, where we're going to defease some of those bonds this prior to the end of this year. I've been talking with Mr. Williford about that already. So, pre-K CK program, fund balance of 409,247. That represents revenues over expenditures of 323,825. We have received 75, over 3/4% of our budgeted revenue as of the end of January, so doing really well there. Special revenue funds, total expenditures as of 1/31 are at 29.31%, but as you know, that's ongoing. Those funds roll every year, and there are multiple different grant funds involved in that. So we are seeing expenditures exceeding revenue in these funds, which is due to the lag, and we spend the money first and then get reimbursed with these funds. So there's a little bit of lag there that continues. Campus activity funds is doing really well. The expenditures are ramping up a little towards the end of the year here. They're starting to spend all that money they've raised. Fund balance of $3,662,951. Revenues are still over expenditures in the amount of $889,214. 2018 bond fund. Revenues exceed expenditures by $3,671,682. We have a total fund balance in that bond fund of $20,808,656. And as I've said before, what's left in that bond fund is all going towards Bel Air, with the exception of a little bit that technology is still spending on, that they have left in their portion of that. The possible bond series 2024, we're at a fund balance of $401,683, and of course we won't have any revenues there until we decide to call a bond election and it passes. So. Locally defined capital projects fund, $57,884,761. That represents expenditures over revenues in the amount of $909,059. And of course, until we ask the board, which we will start doing here pretty quick, to transfer fund balances on all these projects that we talked about that we wanted to move money out of fund balance. We'll start bringing those forward here in the next couple of months as you approve some of those projects that we're looking at. And that's all I've got, unless you have some questions.
Questions on the financials? All right, then, budget transfers and amendment request.
How do I make that advance? Oh. Oh, okay, there we go. I want to go to the next, this one. These are just routine, regular budget transfer requests. Most of these are to move money for travel-related expenditures, for them to go to different conferences and things that they go to, but it's pretty minimal in the big picture and nothing out of the ordinary. So.
Any questions? Oops.
What's the next thing?
I'm sorry, I just logged myself out of the meeting.
I got a paper copy of the agenda if you want it.
All right, any questions on the application for missed school days waiver?
Dobie or Joe, as long as I've been on the board, these seem to always be approved. Is there any chance they wouldn't be?
We should be fine because we had the minutes that you have to have in place. So you have to have at least 2 full days of minutes. We had 4 full days at elementary and 3 full days at secondary. So there's no reason, we did call and verify, so we anticipate no issues.
Any other questions? All right, 7.04, school health support grant purchases. Any questions on that? And international student travel. Looks like there's 2 trips on there. Any questions on those trips? All right, we're down to item 8.01, action items. Consider approval of donations for the March regular board meeting presentation of certificates of appreciation. I'll accept a motion.
I move the board approve the March 2023 donations as presented.
I have a motion and a second for the board to approve the March 2023 donations as presented. Please vote. And that motion passes. Item 8.02, consider approval of license agreement with Tarrant County College District and HEBISD for the use of the pool and locker room. Williams?
Okay, I did a really detailed Friday update, so I think everybody's kind of aware. The main issue here is, although we like to bring them to 2 board meetings, this one kind of put us in a situation where we really need to get this one approved to hold our spot where we are at Tarrant County College for their pool use. So.
All right, any questions? I'll accept a motion.
I move that the board approve the license agreement with Tarrant County College District for the use of pool and locker room during the 2023-2024 school year as presented.
I have a motion and a second for the board to approve the license agreement with Tarrant County College District for the use of the pool and locker room during the 2023-2024 school year as presented. Please vote. That motion passes. Open forum number 2. Any cards, Ms. Hollander? No. All right, other business. Opportunity for board members to request items be placed on the future board agendas. Any items? All right, review of board activity chart. I just looked everything over. It looks like we have everything pretty well covered. So item 10.03, discuss board goal number 3, advocacy. You taking the lead, Ms. Wells?
I'll start and let Fred chime in as needed. As mentioned, I believe at one of the last 2 board meetings, we have the advocacy matrix that we all should be looking at least monthly, to make sure that you're tracking the bills of the legislators that you're assigned to. But prior to that, I had mentioned I was asking you to let me know what the dates are that you have planned meetings with your assigned legislators. So the ones who I would like to hear from, if not tonight, definitely by the next meeting, is for U.S. Senator John Cornyn, which is Julie and Matt, U.S. Senator Ted Cruz, Julie, at least somebody from their office, of course, if not the actual legislator, U.S. Representative Kay Granger, Fred and Andy, State Senator Kelly Hancock, Fred and Rochelle, Representative Giovanni Cabriglione, Chris and Matt, State Board of Education, Pat Hardy, Julie Cole, and Stephanie Click, Fred and Matt. So if you would let Fred and I know your plan to reach out to them to schedule, and if you have a scheduled date to meet with them or their staffer, please let us know that. One thing for tracking purposes, you could use, if you want to write this down, capital.texas.gov. That's a website you can use to see what bills they've authored or co-authored or sponsored. And so I looked on there tonight and saw that Representative Cabriglione is authored House Bill 2210. So that's something for Chris and Matt to be aware of. That's related to school finance. And he also authored or co-authored HB 2482 related to state accountability. So you want to make sure we track that. You go to that website to track. We also can use the TASB legislative report email, and if you haven't signed up to get that email from the TASB Government Relations Office, make sure you do, because they send out good information on a regular basis, and you can track the bills that way. Also, Frisco ISD, I get an email regarding the 88th session update that you can, if you haven't signed up for that, definitely sign up for that, because that'll be a way to help track as well.
The other organization that does a really good weekly update is Raise Your Hand Texas. They do something called 1 Thing to Do and 3 Things to Know.
Right.
Or maybe it's 1 in 5, I don't remember. But it's a very helpful weekly update. I will say that last week on Thursday, Dr. Harrington and I talked with Salman Bujani, who was getting ready to file 2 bills. One, they both related to school a little bit. The first one definitely did. It was about fully funding career and technical education certifications. And so we told him yes, we agreed with that one. And the second one was really about
Assessment, days of assessment?
no,
Okay.
hold on, I can tell you. Yeah, no, that you would understand better than we would. It had to do with the elections, when the elections are uncontested, and being able to cancel the election. Anyway, it came down to he wanted it to be more governed by local control, and my answer to him was, always local control. Now, he's a freshman, so I don't, and I have, my understanding is even though the last day to file a bill is the 10th, they've been told at this point that there's really too many and they're not taking any more.
Okay.
So some of these ones that come in late may not carry much weight, because of course the ones that are on the governor and the lieutenant governor's, you know, sort of top list are the ones that are going to get the most attention. And of course, that has to do with school vouchers. So as you talk to all these legislators, you really want to talk about how, you know, school vouchers don't, we don't support that. And that school vouchers, really what they do is they give the private schools the choice, not the parents.
Any other thing you want to, anything else you want to add, Fred?
No, I think you did a good job. The only thing I would say, and it's kind of obvious, I think we all know it, some of these legislators get really busy, so I would always start with the staffers.
For sure.
Because they seem to be far more responsive in reaching out.
Yep.
So, there you go.
Great job.
And then make sure you invite them, the people that you are assigned to, make sure you invite them to events in the district. They actually love that.
All right. Any questions for Don or Fred? All right. Closed session, we still don't need closed session, so we'll skip that and I'll accept the motion to adjourn.
So moved.
We are adjourned.
I was off by 9 minutes.